The girl, Mary, was about to get off the tube, found a green bag forgotten on her seat. Mary looked around for a moment and to hand it over to the tube service, but by now they were off duty. Mary took the bag home with her and was going to bring it back the next day. Curious, her best friend opened the bag. She found the owner's identity information inside. So the next day, Mary followed the address to the owner's home. The owner was a well-dressed woman in her 60s. When she saw the bag she had found, she invited Mary into her home with gratitude. She invited her in for a cup of coffee. The woman's name was Greta. Her husband had died long ago, and her only daughter is currently studying music in Paris. She now lives alone in this large, old-fashioned house. As they talk, it is surprising to see how much they hate each other. Marie's mother had just died. She feels the warmth of a mother's love in Greta's, who lives alone, finds solace in Mary. In the days that followed, Mary visited Greta frequently. Greta plays beautiful piano music for her, and Mary went shopping with her. They grew close. Their relationship grew closer and closer. In order to see Greta, she even skips a party with her best friend. She kindly reminds Mary not to trust a stranger too much. Mary is unconvinced. That evening, Mary comes to Greta's house again. She inadvertently opens a cupboard and was surprised to find there was a cupboard full of bags exactly like the one she had found. Each bag had a post-it note with a different name and phone number on it. In an instant, Mary felt as if she had fallen into Greta's trap. Terrified, Mary leaves in a hurry, excusing herself as not feeling well. Mary told her best friend about what had happened, although she doesn't know the secret behind the bags. But this sense of foreboding made her decide to break off her relationship with Greta. After that, Marie stopped answering Greta's phone calls, but she didn't expect Greta to persist in calling and texting her. Her best friend had to unplug her home phone line. When Mary stopped talking to her, Greta goes to the restaurant where Marie works to find her. Confronted by the pestering Greta, Mary said bluntly,
"The bags in the closet, Greta. I saw them. You totally had them. Do not come back here."
Greta had to leave a message for Mary explaining that, due to the death of her husband and her daughter was not with her, that she was lonely. She was just trying to make friends with people who had a connection, to make her life a little bit sunnier. She sends Mary flowers to apologize for this, but Mary does not forgive her. But then something happens that makes Mary panic. Greta is standing across the restaurant. She stood across the restaurant, staring straight at her. She stood there all day. Mary was so frightened that she called the police, but there was nothing the police could do. After all, she hadn't broken any laws. Mary just avoided Greta as if she were a thief, but she was like snot. She couldn't get rid of it. Mary couldn't stand it, but there was nothing she could do about it. She had to warn Greta again. And Greta seemed to have lost her patience and actually spat gum on Mary's hair. This person is a psycho. To find out what she's really up to, Mary sneaks up to her door and rummages through the trash. She finds some of Greta's personal letters. Using the phone number on the envelope, Mary called Greta's daughter Nicole. But the person she calls is Nicole's counselor. She is also her girlfriend. From her, she learns that Nicole had committed suicide 4 years earlier. Nicole could not stand Greta's perverted bondage. Nicole was suffering from a serious mental illness that led to her suicide. Greta herself was suffering from a serious mental illness. Mary finally realizes the truth, but she still can't escape Greta's harassment. That day, Marie receives a picture of her best friend in a bar from Greta. Mary is shocked. She calls her girlfriend and tells her that Greta is in her neighborhood. She rushes off, but Greta follows her quietly. She keeps taking photos of her girlfriend and sending them to Marie. Mary is devastated, fearing for her safety. She takes a taxi and goes to meet her. She eventually loses Greta, but the nightmare didn't end there. The next day, Greta comes back to Marie's restaurant. This time she asks Mary to serve her as a customer. Mary is both angry and helpless, but she is left with a cold face. But Greta drops her glass and shouts at her like a madwoman. Mary is terrified by this scene. She was taken away by the police for making a scene in the restaurant. The next day, Greta is released. Mary is at her wit's end when she finds out the news. Her best friend gives her an idea. She asks Marie to contact Greta, give her the benefit of the doubt, and apologize to her, telling her that she was going away for a while, thinking that this might divert Greta's attention. And Greta seems to have come to her senses and gave Mary a big hug. Mary thought she was finally free of her, but little did she know that Greta would see through Marie's lies. And while her best friend is away, She takes Mary to her home. She takes her back to her house. In a daze, Mary saw Greta open a door behind the piano and put her in a large box in the room. Mary woke up to find the doors and windows sealed shut. She finds the identity card of a strange girl in the room. Mary realizes that something bad may have happened to her. Desperate, Mary picks up a chair and slams it against the door, but to no avail. In order to prevent Mary's friends and family from finding out what was going on, Greta uses Marie's mobile phone to send separate messages to Mary's father and best friend. They were led to believe that Mary was on a trip with each other. A few days later, Mary's father thought she and her best friend had returned. He came to the flat to see Mary. She and her best friend realized that they had both been tricked. Mary's father is very worried about Mary, so he hired a private detective to find out what had happened. He soon locates Greta. At this point, Mary, she begins to be coerced by Greta to learn piano and foreign languages from her.
No. One more time. Message. Collage.
Collage.
Good. Learning.
Greta treats Mary like her own daughter. At night, she makes her drink milk with pills in it. Then she puts her to sleep as if she were a child. On this day, Mary took advantage of Greta's surprise. She knocked her unconscious with a rolling pin. Then, in a panic, she ran outside. She found that all the doors and windows were locked. She had to go to the basement. The door to the basement was also locked. Suddenly she saw a bag on the floor and opens it to find a dying girl inside. Just then, Greta wakes up and suddenly appears behind Mary. She knocked her unconscious. She then ties her to the bed. That day, a private detective arrives at Greta's house and she was asked to investigate Mary's whereabouts. Mary heard someone coming. She struggled desperately. The detective noticed something unusual behind the piano. While Zelida was leaving the living room, moved the piano quietly. It was at this point the detective quickly collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Mary was completely desperate. Soon, she too would be like the girl in the basement, dying a silent death, and Greta began to look for a new target. She put the bait on the seat and leaves. Soon, a girl was hooked. The next day, the girl came to the door. Greta entertained her warmly. Greta stumbled to get a rag.
I think that happened to a friend of mine once. Hours and hours, I searched the goddamn subway for that bag.
It turned out that this girl was none other than Marie's best friend. She had just taken advantage of Greta. She had just put drugs in Greta's coffee.
Oh no, you're overdosing.
Mary heard her best friend's voice and struggled to get up. The girlfriends finally found Mary and got her out. Finally, they put Greta in the wooden box and called the police. After watching this film, I just want to say, I would like to have such a beautiful and capable best friend.